Good morning to all of you. Welcome to this webinar, Key Things to Know about the G3 certification process. It's good to see many familiar faces and also a few new attendees, and we're glad you're all joining us today. We will take a close look in this webinar at the certification process, a crucial step for manufacturers looking to certify chipsets and products. But this is also valuable for end users like utilities to get a better understanding of the process and the implications. We will discuss, for example, the requirements for certification, typical duration of the process, and we will share expert insights from the people from the labs, including frequently asked questions and best practices for certification testing. So I'm very pleased we have the experts from the labs joining us today. So as you can see on the screen, we are joined by Martin Sitz from TÜV in Japan, Thierry Dolliger from Landpark in France, Yannick Huck from Trialog in Paris is with us, and also Vincent Bouchou, also from Landpark, to answer any really technical questions for us. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please post them in the question box on your screen. Then we can address them right away in the presentation. And after the presentation, we will share the slides with all of you, so you don't have to make any copies or things like that. So a short introduction. The G3 Alliance developed a thorough certification program so the market can safely invest in G3 technologies. Safely invest, what does that mean? Well, certification ensures compliance with the G3 standard, and certification enables interoperability between devices from different manufacturers. So this is very important for end users to reduce supply chain risk, to avoid vendor lock-in, and to ensure long-term support and flexibility for the end users. So therefore, operating a strong certification program is one of the key tasks of the G3 Alliance. And here you can see the certification logos that can be used together with certified chipsets and platforms. The Alliance operates a very mature certification program. It opened in 2014. We already certified over 600 certificates from 70 manufacturers in over 25 different countries. And as you can see in the graph, the certification is continuously growing still. On our website, you can find a link to all the certified platforms and certified products. And in our booth in Enlit Europe, we always have a large wall where we showcase a lot of certified platforms and certified meters normally. So if you want to look them in real life, you're very welcome to join us there. There are two independent test labs that perform G3 certification testing. That is Landpark in France, you can see it on the left, and TÜV in Japan, you can see it on the right. Both of them have a lot of experience with certification testing. They have a lot of expertise with the G3 technology, and they can support you very well in the certification. And it's good to know that both labs do all types of certification testing. So there is no division of PLC band plans or types of certification. No, both labs do all the G3 certification testing for you. The G3 Alliance is responsible for the certification program, for the definition of the tests, for the development of the tests, and also for issuing the certificates. at the end, and of course that is done based on the test reports and documents developed by the test labs. So basically there are 3 steps towards G3 certification. On the left, for chipset manufacturers who want to certify platforms, the first step is to become a member of the alliance. The certification, the G3 certification program, is only open to manufacturers that are member of the alliance. Second step for chipset manufacturers is they have to pass an interoperability plugfest, and we will come back to that in a few minutes. And thirdly, the chipset manufacturer needs to successfully pass the certification testing in one of the certification labs. And on the right, very similar for end product manufacturers who are looking to certify a product. So first, they have to become a member of the alliance. For certified products, they must use a certified chip. And thirdly, of course, they need to pass the certification testing in one of the test labs. So these are the 3 steps to come to certification. Okay, what are the topics we will address today? We will explain what is the IoT Plugfest and how to apply for certification. And these are related to the application phase of the certification process, so to say. Then we will explain what kind of testing is required, what do you need to provide for the testing, which is related to the testing step in the certification process. We will briefly talk about issuing certificates, and then we will answer a lot of questions that are frequently asked to the test labs related to all the steps in the certification process. So that's kind of the agenda for the session this morning. So now let's start with the first topic. What is the IoT Plugfest? And I think there is no better person than Yannick to explain about that. Yannick, so can I hand to you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Leon. Good morning, everyone. So indeed, the first step for certification process is the IoT Plugfest. So the IoT Plugfest is meant to validate the good understanding of the G3 specification and is mandatory before a platform certification. So it means that it's only required for platform manufacturers. So it's not applicable to product manufacturer, for instance. And the IoT Plugfest have to be passed one time by each implementers. So when a new implementers implemented the G3 specification or developed a new platform, then you need to go through this IoT Plugfest to be able to apply afterwards to the certification. And it is also required in case a new feature have been implemented. So for instance, currently frequency hopping requires to go through this IoT Plugfest, and in the future, for the next version of the certification process, we'll add 2 new features which are related to the battery power devices and the FCC embedding. And if you want to support that and certify your device for that, or for this feature, you will have to go through first the IoT Plugfest. So the IoT Plugfest are operated by Trialog, so by us in Paris, and they are composed of 2 main steps. So you start with providing test vector that we analyzed to identify any potential issues, and we also support you to solve the issue we have identified. And it ends with an interoperability Plugfest against golden implementation. So if you want any further information, or if you need to apply for that, you can directly contact me. So in case you want to certify the platform and already have passed the IoT Plugfest, or directly want to certify the product, then you can directly apply for certification by contacting a G3 certification laboratory. So you can ask for quotation and availability for testing. And if you decide to book a testing slot, then you have to complete an application form that will contain all the information the lab's needs, but also the alliance needs. So for instance, if it's a platform, if it's a product, and which type of feature it supports. So afterwards, based on the provided information, the G3 Alliance will check if the application is valid, which is checking first if the manufacturer who applies is a member in good standing. As mentioned before by Leon, certification is only available to member of the G3 Alliance. And also we verify that the device is eligible for certification. So for instance, for platform, we'll check if the platform manufacturer have correctly or successfully passed the IoT Plugfest. And for product, there is also rules defined, such as the product has to be based on a certified platform, or also the platform that is embedded on the product have to be certified on the same version or on the same certification version than the product will be. So when everything has been checked and validated by the Alliance, you can continue and agree on commercial contract with the test laboratory, and you have to provide further information that will be presented or more detailed by Martin later on. So this is the sample for testing and the PIX and PIXIC templates. So if I continue, the certification is done on the latest version of the internally published G3 specification. So it's not always linked to the version that is available at ITU, for instance. And the current version of the certification is version 7. And you can find the certification number on the certificate number. So at the end, the last number is related to the version of the certification that has been used to certify the device. So if you want to apply, like I mentioned before, there is several certification profiles available, which are mainly related to the 4 PLC BAM plans that are supported by the certification, which are CNLAK, CNLAK-B, FCC, and ARIB. So you have to select which one you have based on, of course, the BAM plan that is supported by your device. And if you want to certify the NRF or an hybrid device, then you can select also which are the RF frequency your device supports. So there is several of them, and there are some that are mandatory and some that are optional. And finally, there is also optional feature that can be supported or not by your device, such as the current modulation for the PLC part, or if it's an hybrid device or not, and the frequency hopping that I mentioned before. So now, based on the provided information, the testing scope is identified. So all testing or the testing that have to be done is fully described in the test procedure document. So you can refer to this document to know what testing has to be done. But testing is done for a specific hardware and a specific firmware version, and normally include conformance, interoperability, and performance. So these are the three major items that are covered by the certification. And in some cases and exceptional situation, full retest or full testing is not always done. So, for instance, no testing is needed for identical product, or partial retesting can be done after hardware modification have been done in the certified product. And you can find all the situations that are known and applicable in the test procedure document also. So you can refer to that to know in which situation you are and which type of testing will have to be done. Finally, we want to highlight that, as I mentioned before, there is several RF configuration, and it may be beneficial to include all the RF configuration in the initial testing phase, rather than restricting it to a smaller set. For instance, it's better to include, or we suggest to include all the RF configuration to avoid unnecessary retesting. To include everything, because it's if your device can support all the RF configuration or several ones, we advise you to include that from the start of your testing. But as a general rules, the labs can help you to identify which type of testing are needed and guide you towards the testing process. So do not hesitate to ask questions and consult them to know what to do at this stage.
Yeah.
So now I will give the floor to Martin, who will continue with the next item.
Okay, thank you very much, Yannick. In this section, we will discuss what has to be provided to the lab for testing. My name is Martin Zietz from the G3 lab of TÜV Rheinland in Japan. So, next slide, please. First of all, what we need is, of course, test samples. We will explain about them a bit later. Then we need the so-called PICs and PICSIT documents. These describe the features and the performance of the product. They serve as an input for test and as a base for certification. The third set is we need, of course, setup instructions. That should include all operation instructions to safely install the product for testing. And most important is a proper wiring diagram for the AC connections. A wrong connection could lead to really severe damage. In addition, we highly recommend that you also supply jigs and tools to perform firmware updates. These will enable us to install firmware right in the lab. For example, after countermeasures have been done and countermeasures were implemented in firmware, then we can implement the firmware here right in the lab. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the test samples. We need 2 identical test samples for each combination of PLC band plan and roll. role that is pan coordinator or pan device. For example, if you have a product which supports PLC band plans, let's say Senelec A and FCC, and it can operate as a pan device and also as a pan coordinator, then there are 4 combinations. Hence, we need 8 samples. It is possible to combine or to use the same hardware for multiple bands and also for multiple roles if these can be easily activated in the lab, for example, by changing the firmware or changing a parameter. Please include also all the jigs, tools, cables, and antennas needed to operate the product during testing. That's pretty logical, but I would like to point this out that this is not forgotten. And then, of course, you should install the proper firmware before sending the sample here and test everything really fully before you even send out the sample. There are some functional requirements, very specific, they are specified in the document Common Test Requirements for G3 certification. So please pay attention especially to the section about the ICMPv6 and UDP responders. These are absolutely necessary to operate the test sample during testing. Then it is also important to have the right connections for the AC line. So please check with the lab what they have available and how to connect this to the AC. Generally, we have simple wire terminals. They are supported by each lab, and also the single-phase or three-phase connectors for Europe and for the US. Anything else, then please contact the lab before. We may need adapters and special cables from you. Okay, next slide. There are a few specific requirements for products with RF hybrid functions. The RF tests are performed in 2 different ways. All are done in a shielded box or shielded chamber, but we connect the DOT in 2 different ways. The first is radiated. That means the measurement is done over the air using antennas. This is done for the RF conformance, RF IoT, and also for some RF performance tests. The second way is conducted tests. The device under test, the DOT, that is connected then through a 50 ohm cable to the tester and using a safety coupler for safety reasons I will explain later. The setup is done for the RF performance tests, so the physical performance tests. For the radiated test, please provide your original antenna, that is the one you deploy also in the market. And for the conducted tests, we need an accessible antenna connector of SMA type. If the original antenna is not detachable, or if the RF connector is not accessible, then you need to provide a second set of test samples. In these test samples, please remove the antenna, provide an accessible RF connector with an SMA connector. So here's one more very, very valuable hint for you. And this was, that was already mentioned by Yannick. It is advisable that you already right away apply for all possible RF configurations which your device supports. It is easy later to disable certain RF configurations if you don't need them in the market, but it normally requires new tests and certification if you want to add further RF configurations later on. So, and the next point, that is very important and very, very critical. please inform the labs about any potential hazard which your product may present to the test engineer or the test system, especially electric hazards. I give you one example. In the case that you have an internal radio module which is not sufficiently isolated from AC mains voltage, and you then affix a temporary RF connector to it, which is necessary for the conducted RF tests, then there may be hazardous voltage present at this RF connector. And that is a great danger to the test lab, to the test engineer, and therefore we must be aware of this. This is a very highly important point. Please don't forget that. Okay. Then a few words to the logistics. Indicate on each sample the band plan, the role, and if possible also the serial number, so that we can identify which sample to use for which test. So it's very hard when you have a sample for FCC, but we think it's supposed to be the one for Senelec. That will not work. The next point is, please make sure that during the transport, the sample is very well protected. For example, by proper packaging, but also make sure that you firmly fix internal modules and antenna cables. Occasionally we have some samples here which are dead on delivery, or they have a detached wiring board or loose RF cables. So send these samples directly to the lab. It was also indicated by Yannick already. And then indicate please on the correct address on the package. And also it's best to address the package to a certain person, in our lab, for example, to me, to the receiver, so that we have a smooth handling in the warehouse. The best practice is here to write on the package G3 test sample. For international shipping, please declare also a suitable low value in the proforma invoice. So the proforma invoice is for customs declarations. There please indicate also test samples of no commercial value. Otherwise, the lab does not really want to pay unnecessary import duties or taxes. So after the certification, the samples which are used for testing, they will remain in the test lab. We will not return them. That is per Alliance rules. Next slide. Before we even start testing, we need some critical information, and these are the following. The PICS and PICSIT, they were already mentioned. These documents contain essential information which are used for testing and also for certification. The test data will be entered into the test system. And so therefore, please fill them in very accurately and carefully. Make sure that they are correct and they are suitable to your test sample and to your product. The PICs, these are the Protocol Implementation Conformance Statement, quite long name, will also be included in the test report. So therefore, it is advisable, or please make sure that you show the proper PICs values which you need to show to your customers. The PICSIT, that is a longer word, the Protocol Implementation Extra Information for Testing. This contains all relevant information which is necessary for testing of a particular test sample. So this particular test sample has a specific MAC address or security keys. These are listed in the PICSIT. Please make sure that they are really correct. Otherwise, we cannot even start the testing, and we'll come back to you to ask you for this information. And that takes extra time. So now please let me point out also a few specific items. Decide yourself the proper voltage, the AC voltage, which you need for testing. Very important, is it now 220 or 230 volt or 50 or 60 hertz? Please indicate the correct value on the PIC-SIT and think about it, what your customer needs. We will test only at this one specific or specified voltage, and that will turn up in the certificate later. If you then want to change the voltage afterwards, that leads to extra testing. So you can avoid this by making sure that you right away choose the right voltage. Also for three-phase equipment, please indicate if this communicates on a single phase or if it is communicating on all three lines. Most three-line equipment, they can communicate on all three lines. So please indicate this correctly in the PIC-SIT document, the PICS document. And finally, then also please make sure that the PICs are, I mentioned this already, are really listing the proper values you want to show to your customers and which show up in the certificate. If there are no PICs listed, or if they are just using the default values, then you end up with pretty low threshold values, which don't really show what your device can do in reality. So please take care to indicate the proper PICs values. That concludes my part, and I would like now to hand over to Thierry.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin, for your very clear presentation. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I am Thierry Douliget, CEO of Landpark, located in Tours, central France. I will now give you some advice to facilitate your certification process. First of all, maybe you can change the slide, please, Leon. So first of all, how to increase your chances of being certified the first time. There are two complementary options to prepare your products for certification. First, you can pre-test your product in your own laboratory using the conformance test tool provided by Trialog. This does not cover interoperability or performance testing, but this does ensure that the platform has been correctly integrated in your product, and that the prerequisites for certification are correctly implemented. So I'm talking here about products. Of course, for platform, it's also very interesting to have this kind of tool in order to pre-test your product before going to the lab. Second option is to use the pre-testing services proposed by the labs. This pre-test can cover all or part of the certification test coverage, depending on your needs. Of course, the pre-test coverage can be discussed and agreed between you and the test labs. These pre-tests allow you to check the maturity of your product before running the official tests. It checks the good behavior of your product for performance tests, whether in PLC or in RF. It allows you to determine the performance peaks of your product if you have not been able to evaluate them internally. And of course, it allows you to identify any potential improvements and to solve any issues we may detect during these pre-test sessions. Next slide, please. Now let's move on to the most frequently asked questions about G3 testing. First question, how long does the certification process take? G3 certification process can be completed within a few weeks, provided there are few or no issues. Note that this does not include the time needed for the interoperability plugfest if required for platform certification. Total time needed depends, of course, of the availability of the test lab, the availability of the test samples. And the duration of the test campaign itself depends on the maturity of the device and whether pretesting is wanted. Also, if retesting is required, debugging can take a long time, especially if it requires hardware adjustment or modifications. But typically, a certification test campaign up to the issue of the certificate and without any major problem detecting during testing takes between 2 weeks and 1 month. Next slide, please. Second question, how can we determine the cause of a failed result? So the laboratory will supply comprehensive logs and testing data for every executed test, as well as sniffer traces for every test that ends in a fail. So sniffer traces can be accessed as formatted text as well as in Wireshark format. So usually this information is adequate to implement corrective actions. And of course, you can discuss with a test engineer to have more detailed explanation on the failures. Third question, are we allowed to observe the testing? So yes, all laboratories adhering to international quality standards permit customers to be present during testing. So observing the testing may be useful to better understand the purpose and manner in which tests are performed and to explain failures. Fourth question, do we have to attend the testing? So no, usually the lab operates alone. Attendance by customer is not required. As previously outlined, what matters is proper preparation. Fifth question, will I receive a test report? So yes, the laboratory will provide you a comprehensive test report that includes all test data. So this will be done at the end of the test campaign. Next slide, please. Sixth question. What are the best strategies to prepare for certification and minimize unforeseen issues? This is a very pertinent question that I will answer with 3 main tips. So first, collaborate closely with your chipset supplier. This is particularly important to ensure that you have the correct firmware version and configuration settings to be able to pass the test successfully. Second, reach out to your certification testing lab in advance. It is important to anticipate the testing session because there are many elements to prepare before the test, whether it is the application forms that will have to be validated by the Alliance, the commercial agreement with the laboratory, the test samples that may need to be modified to be able to pass the test, so as explained by Martin previously, or simply agree on a date for your testing session. Third, pre-test in the lab, focusing on the most critical test cases. This will at least help to reassure you, improve the performance of your product, or even correct possible failure before running the official tests. Seventh question. What are the major challenges encountered in testing? So this is a big question. Of course, every single certification test is important and may present difficulties. Aggregating experience on the certification test is a key factor of success when applying for G3 certification. When new features are included in the certification program, like the support of RF medium or any new G3 features, it is important to enrich your experience with the new added test cases and to check whether your product is mature against these new features. Implementers should be aware that challenges may occur from part of their design that are not related to the G3 implementation itself. For instance, some interference may arise from the spurious emissions of a separate chip or controller, or may arise from a badly designed embedded power supply. Such physical interferences can negatively impact the G3 signals and will need to be reduced before running the official certification tests. Also, aspects like electrical background noise or input impedance must be considered out with great care when implementers fine-tune and calibrate their levels in order not to harm the reception or the transmission of the G3 signals. We also quite see often timing issues with packets, notably with acknowledged signals, and errors in the implementation of necessary jitter for the access to the channel using the CMA-CA mechanism. Sometimes we can see impairments in the modulation at reception, and also the estimation of the LQI value may also be a key challenges factor. Next slide, please. 8th question, how can I get support if I want to run some performance test internally or if I want to understand the implementation of the performance tests? So we encourage you to reach out to the test lab as they can assist you and offer explanations. They can give you the necessary detail for understanding the test configuration and methodology applied during the G3 certification test campaigns. In addition, in the event of a complex technical question, laboratories can contact the G3 Alliance and its technical study groups. Any technical request can thus be forwarded to the G3 Alliance in order to obtain precise answers for you. So now you are well prepared to successfully pass all the required G3 certification tests. Next slide, please, Leon.
Before going to the next slide, Thierry, maybe we can take a look at a few questions that were related to the testing and answer those before we go to the certification part.
Yeah, if you want.
So there were a few questions. You can see them in the question box. One question was, if the application firmware is updated, does the G3 certification testing have to be repeated, even if the protocol part is not modified?
Sorry, can you repeat?
If the application firmware version is updated, does the G3 certification have to be repeated, even if the protocol part is not modified?
So I think for all this kind of question, I think this is something that is listed on the test procedures document, I think in section 8. So for any modification, I think there are some retesting or not that are listed. So it's clearly indicated here. I think for firmware modification, of course, you need to have to retest your product.
Yeah, I'm looking at Yannick as well. Yannick, because the G3 certificate applies to a specific version of the G3 part of the firmware, I think.
Yep, indeed. So if it's only related to application firmware, so it's outside of the G3 part, let's say, you do not need to repeat the test in this case.
Yeah, so if it's in the G3 part, then you have to retest. If it's on the application part, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the G3 firmware is the same, and the certificate remains valid, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was a very specific question. And another question is if using a standalone G3 hybrid module that can be installed to multiple meter models, are multiple different certifications required?
So you need to. Yes, there are different certificates. So a certificate is dedicated to one product. But if you are using the same module on G3 module on different products, then you just have to pass the performance test. So it's not necessary to redo the conformance and IoT test.
Yeah.
So there is a subset of tests to be passed in such a case.
Yeah.
But each product needs to be certified. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a specific paragraph in the certification procedures specifically about this situation, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe if I can comment further. in that particular situation, we need to make sure that the module is implementing the whole G3 stack, meaning the PLC and the RF.
Mm-hmm.
And for the testing, in such situations, for the testing itself, so we are using the module that has been used for certification of, for example, if it's a single phase meter and a three-phase meter using the same modules, we are using and we are certifying the three-phase meter first. Then we are using the module of the three-phase meter. We use this module in the single-phase meter to do the test. So, exactly. So it means that you have to be able to extract the module and then to put on the other products.
Yeah. And last question before we move on to the next part. We talked specifically about the voltages to be applied during the testing. So if you have a device which is designed to work at multiple voltages, for example, 120 and 240 volts, and multiple frequencies, do you need to repeat the tests twice?
So no, today it is done with one single frequency and one single voltage. I think, and this is usually the case. I think most of the products are using are compliant with multiple voltage and frequency.
The only thing is that we do mention the voltage and frequency used in testing in the certificate.
Yes.
So if you want certificates with both mentioning the multiple voltages and frequencies, then you would need to do at least part of the testing twice.
Yeah.
But I've never seen that in all of these certifications so far. All right. If anybody has another question, then please raise your hand or put it in the question box. But for now, I think let's move on, Martin, to the Thierry, to the last part of your presentation.
So as I said, now you are well prepared to successfully pass all the G3 certification tests. So when done, the final steps to get the certificate are the following. So the lab prepares the test documents, so the report, testing data logs, etc. The laboratory provides you with a test report as well as a certification confirmation form that you have to complete, sign, and return to the testing laboratory. This document is then countersigned by the lab and sent to the Alliance with the first page of the test report for the edition of the certificate and the publication of the product and certificate in the list of certified products of the G3 Alliance website. So the certification process is then finalized. And I think that's all for me. So Leo, this is your turn.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Thierry, for explaining all that. So all the information regarding certification is available on the G3 Alliance website. Part of the information is available to anybody visiting the website. You can see the link here on the page. So on the general part of the website, you can find general information about the certification process, the contact details of the test labs, a list of all the certified devices, and also a few guidelines regarding the G3 protocol and the certification. And then there is additional information available for members of the Alliance. That is the certification program and the detailed certification test procedures. We mentioned those a couple of times. Also the test specifications themselves and the common test requirements document are available for members on the website. The reference version that is used in the certification is is listed in the test procedures document in Annex 3. So there you can exactly see which version is the reference for the current certification testing. And members normally have a login to the website, but if you don't have a login and you are a member, please send an email to this web address and we will share with you your login details right away. So that's the information. And then I think we are good on time. So if there are any other questions in the audience, then please share them so we can talk about that. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's one more question about firmware. If the product's firmware is updated, and I think that this refers to the G3 related firmware, is it necessary to repeat the certification? Who wants to address that? Vincent, maybe?
Yes, with pleasure. Well, very basically, if your firmware changes are done outside the G3 stack, you wouldn't need to retest in full for sure. And whenever the modifications are within the stack, then that would be a retest required.
But that's also what Thierry explained, the benefit of the pre-testing.
Exactly.
You can
yeah,
especially
when those changes addresses the higher layers or application layers, rather, I would say, then you wouldn't need to retest.
Yeah. And another question here. It's linked to a previous question I had, I think. If 2 meters have the same communication module, it can be switched, but they have different application firmware running. Is it necessary to repeat the G3 certification twice for both devices? Thierry, I think you partly answered this already.
If there are two different hardware, I think yes, you have to recertify. The module itself is used for both products, and then you just have to. So the lab will just do the performance test because, of course, as there are two different hardware, performances can be different. But for the conformance and IoT tests, they will not be repeated. So it means that the test coverage will be limited in such a case.
Yeah. All right. Then another question we received in the application already. Yannick, maybe you can help with that. It was mentioned that in the next certification release, we will include the certification of battery-powered devices. So the question is, so how would certification look like for a G3 hybrid RF-only device, an RF battery-powered device? So it doesn't have the PLC.
Yep. So basically, a new certification profile will be defined for that with a list of tests. And basically, the test will be the same. So there will be conformance, interoperability, and performance. But this list of tests will be reduced, let's say, compared to an hybrid device, for instance. So we'll test only the RF part because it's only the RF communications that will be implemented by a battery powered device. But yeah, this is under definition. So I think you will soon get more information about that and clearer information when the new certification will be released with all the tests that will be done, but it will cover also conformance, interoperability, and performance.
Yeah, yeah. And a related question, maybe, Yannick. So you mentioned certification of battery power devices, and we talked a lot about certification of meters. Is it any difference for? Is there a big difference for certification of non-metering devices? We joked about certification of streetlights, Martin, in the past, because they don't fit in your lab. But for example, looking at gateway devices, for example, is the certification of these devices really different from meters?
So I would say no, because the testing scope or the test that will be done will be the same. The only difference that may apply is related to the performance. So maybe in some for some devices, the performance required do not necessarily needs to be, let's say, high. So if I compare two small cases, for a gateway that will be used to communicate between a meter and inside the house, you will not need to have, for instance, high performances because the distance maybe will be low and yeah, the context will ease the communication, the PLC communication, for instance, compared to a smart meter where you will be really on the field with a long cable or different impedance and different, let's say, PLC condition. But this is the main difference, I will say. But related to the testing, the test will be exactly the same.
Okay, Vincent, another question I think you will be able to answer. It's regarding performance testing. Does the testing include any physical level tests? And if so, what kind of tests?
Yeah. So indeed, we have physical layer measurements and tests done both in PLC and RF. Basically, those, and also we have performance tests that are performed at the timings level. So basically, we would also measure timings. But if I can resume, the performance test will cover so physical tests like tests with noise, with different noise, different kind of noise, testing the different modulations of the PLC also. We will test also some features like the sensitivity of the PLC or the RF medium, device. We will test some LQI, the LQI accuracy, and also we will test with different noise. And in RF, more specifically, we will also test some tolerance regarding the frequency. I mean by that we will test the transmission, the transmitted frequency. I mean the frequency you use for transmission. So we will test the tolerance and the accuracy of it. And yeah, these are the 5-layer and performance tests we do in the certification test campaigns.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Vincent. If there is any further has specific questions about that, then please let us know. I think we covered most of the questions already, and looking at the time, we're doing very well, but it's 10, so I think we should end the webinar. And I want to thank everybody for joining, and especially a special thank for all the people from the labs who joined us today and shared their experience for the G3 certification testing. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. The contact details of all of us will be in the presentation that I will share with you after the webinar. And then we all wish you great success with your certifications, and hope to see you in the labs soon.